everyone.
Hello.
Sorry, that was a long wait. I always feel like awkward when people are like, oh, we're here early, let's sit. But once again, I'm glad you guys are here. I'm glad everyone is here. I'm just gonna briefly introduce myself again because some people weren't here when I did it the first time. I'm AC, I'm a licensed mental health therapist. I made the panel just because I really love gaming, I really love cosplay, I'm a huge nerd and I use gaming, and you'll learn what the term gamification means in a panel, but I use a lot of that in my practice with the work I do with my clients as well as just in general. So I'm so excited you all are here today to be a part of our panel.
Hi, I'm Titus. Everyone calls me Wandernchaos online. I'm a content creator for No Way Esports, and I play tech on a professional level. And I'm here to support and give any more help make with the panel.
Give a gaming perspective
Yeah.
from somebody who does it competitively.
Because there's a lot of misconceptions even once you go into that field. You're like, oh, it's going to be just gaming. No, you got to take care of your mental health too. So.
Right. And mental health is such a big, important part of our lives, and why not tie it into something that many people enjoy? So that's what we're going to be kind of going over today. I kind of said it earlier, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. I don't know if we have like a mic to pass around, but we'll work through it together and figure it out. And I'll do the best I can to answer your questions, or Titus can as well. Sound good? Cool. Awesome. Okay. So we're going to start.
If it decides to work, okay.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
All right. What is the one thing that Americans say they struggle with the most during the pandemic?
Anybody know the answer to that question? Go ahead. Loneliness. Oh, that's exactly the answer. It is loneliness.
Yeah.
Does anybody know why that was the case, besides the obvious? Like why loneliness stood out the most? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, super isolating. And what do we think that we craved the most? Yeah.
Interaction.
Yes, interaction, people, community, right?
And
longing. Yeah. So a lot of times, right, because we were separated for a while and we were apart from one another for so long, a lot of people took up gaming as a form to build that community and as a form to like have some level of interaction with other humans. So, we're going to talk about the power of that today in our work. And unfortunately, loneliness still lingers today. And there's still many people who 4 years later are still feeling the effects of the pandemic as well.
Mm-hmm. So why gaming?
Yep.
What motivates people to game? How does gaming help improve mental health overall? What are professionals doing to include gaming in their practice? And definitely gamification, and any other questions you guys have.
So these are the things we're going to target today that we're going to try to answer to the best of our ability, and also give you some more information about, because these are really core and these are really important. Okay? Any questions so far? No? A lot of head shakes.
Cool.
Okay. So this is a long slide, and I'm going to break it down a little bit more. Because, you see all of it, but sometimes presenters don't break it apart. Because of the pandemic, right, we know loneliness was a huge factor of why we sought out community, right? Why we started gaming, why we started, getting online, trying to talk to each other, right, to bridge that. Well, as a result, there was also a high demand for mental health services as well. And Americans, like the dip, went from very many, it was maybe about 30 to 40% of our population wanting services for other things before the pandemic, and then it skyrocketed to 85% of our population seeking out some type of group or therapy or community that they could go see in person to try to make up for working through what they struggled with during the pandemic, to make up for that loneliness. So not only through gaming, but through mental health and treating and working through that. So what happens is that we probably know, unfortunately, America's expensive, right? Right? And so what happens to mental health services? They go up, right? So the demand goes up, but the cost goes up as well. And you'll hear me a lot diss on therapy in general, not in the sense of its effectiveness, but the cost is what costs people the ability to get access to those type of resources. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. So what happens is this really impacted people's mental health in the sense of that it created anxiety and depression. You said isolation earlier. It created a lot of what we call adjustment disorders. And adjustment is during significant periods, usually 6 months or more, of like prolonged stress, not knowing how to work through life or make connections with humans, even after the pandemic, maybe at work, that type of thing. So as a result of that, people really started seeking out alternative activities to help improve their mental health because they were like, well, therapy can't afford it. Therapy is not accessible. Groups aren't accessible. And that's where gaming became such a crucial part of that as well, right? So we know the impact of the pandemic. We know that things are expensive. So now we have to figure out alternative ways to try to improve our mental health. Therapists were like, oh, great, everybody's doing things. What can we do to try to give back and help be a part of that? And we'll talk more about that more in a second. But here are some of the things people were started doing as well as a result of using gaming. They started changing the genre of gaming that they had. So you maybe, did anybody else here play Animal Crossing or played Animal Crossing during the pandemic? Yeah. That was a huge game, right, during the pandemic. Yeah. People sought out a change. That was one of the ways that they could have community and things. But also it was maybe a different change in what they were used to playing, right? It allowed them to connect with their friends, to, dig for gold pieces, to hate capitalism, that is Mr. Nook. Yeah.
You probably had that one friend that went from playing something like Overwatch or League of Legends to something like, I'm going to play Animal Crossing because people aren't screaming at me.
Right. Yeah. So, it helped to improve, motivation. It helped to improve, the other things that we talked about, like community and unity and things like that. But even more so, people used it for meditation and yoga and, mindfulness, those types of things. Changing genres of games and, mixing it up can make a huge difference on the impact of our perception and how we impact each other and how we impact the world around us. Other people started completing side quests instead of the main story. The reason why is because it tells you more about outside characters and their perceptions and, they're NPCs. Maybe they're annoying. Maybe you just didn't want to hear them talk and you completed the quest very quickly. I don't know. But that was something that started happening more frequently as a result. People started approaching games and the way that they interacted with games differently, okay? You guys are here, everyone here. Y'all are all here for a reason. You're here for a convention, right? For whatever reason that may be. But conventions started popping, right? People are like, anime, yes. Manga, yes. Cosplay, gaming. So they went to conventions to be amongst other people once we were able to start being around people. And so they sought that out. And now we know that these conventions are so mainstream now. So many people go to them now, right? There's an influx of community to go around, right?
Post-pandemic, there's been a surge of conventions getting more expensive in not just inflation, but just they're capping out. MAGFest, we capped out and we're not even done with the first day. So, this is an example, more people are going to conventions just to be around mental, people. So,
right. People also started seeking out gaming groups, which has become more popular. So, does anybody play D&D? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of hands. So, some people play What was that?
Does Baldur's Gate 3 count?
It can.
Yes,
can.
yeah.
It can. But
you can play with friends,
But people started seeking out, other ways, right? Baldur's Gate 3, D&D. Not only are you hanging out with your friends, but you're telling your own story, and you have your own character, and you're creating that identity. It gives you kind of an escape, right? The ability, maybe you want to be someone else sometimes, but maybe the fantasy that you live in, despite your circumstances, is better and healthier for you at the same time, right? Other things like therapy groups, and like I said, therapists started doing this and created board games that were meant for mental health. Board games and tabletop games. I know that there's some of you out there that probably do tabletop as well, are really popular. Even rhythm games are super popular because it gets your body moving. It allows you to move parts of yourself that maybe otherwise, because of mental health reasons, would be a stalemate and be harder to move or get out of bed, right? And so these are the popular things that we started doing as a result of gaming and as a result of what's available to us and what became available to us as a result of really unfortunate circumstance, that affected the whole entire world, right? Any questions so far? No?
Okay.
All right. So, you guys can shout words if you want on this part. You'll see some words in a second that are going to pop up on the screen. But what is video, like one word of what video games or gaming has done for you? What is it? What have you learned from it or something? Friends, what was that? Storytelling. Anything else? Say again?
Patience. Yep.
Relaxation.
Relaxation.
Focus. I heard. Okay.
We heard anger.
Rage. Okay.
Disconnect.
Let's change that. Is the problem solving, scheduling,
Helpless.
Hold on. I heard two different things. As a therapist, I need to stop. You okay out there?
Go do some side quests. Don't do the main quest anymore. Just stop.
We gotta take a pause.
Don't save the world. Go save the little animal or something else.
Yeah. Community. Stabilism? Creative answers. We'll talk after. But yeah, so these are things. You see on the screen that there's a lot more, right? It's given us all each individual things that we can roll with and that it gives us. Oh, I know. It's going to show up in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are some of the main things. We have feedback, rules, achievement, role play, motivators, relationships. We heard collaborations, belonging, status, support, right? There's a whole bunch more. But we know that these things helped get us to where we are. They helped us get out of a rut or get out of hard times and be able to seek what we wanted out of it and got us to a place of all of the things that you guys shared and you all shared and even up here. So gaming has a lot of positives and a lot of things that it provides for us. And that's why it's so great that we can use gaming, and since it's such a wide spectrum, right, to be able to reach out to people the way that we have.
All right. Games are so compelling because they satisfy the ABCs of the human needs. What's his name?
So Douglas Gentile is a psychologist from Iowa State. He actually wrote a dissertation on gamification, and he calls it the ABCs of gaming. Okay, so A is autonomy. The easiest way that we can define it in terms of gaming, gamification, is we like to feel like we're in control. When we game, we are in control. We don't control the story. Sometimes we do, depending on the game. But we're in control of what type of game we want to play, what mood we're in when we play, if we really hate the NPCs. Just saying, some are really annoying. What we want to wear, what kind of character we're going to design if it's one of those games. Who we're going to shoot first, depending on if we're playing a shooting game. Just saying, in that sense of the positive, right? Belonging, we talked a lot about belonging, but Douglas Gentile talks a lot about the idea that we feel like we are connected to other people because we as human beings need that connection to other people, right? We crave human interaction and human connection because we went without it for so long. And we learned during the pandemic that the longer we're away from our fellow humans, the more isolated and restricted we are, the more our mental health is affected, right? And the more as we as humans are affected, right? We look at this in terms of identity. We can look at this in terms of like not knowing about people's well-being, that type of stuff. And C is competence. If there's a game that you are really, really good at, you're probably going to feel good that you're good at that game, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe you just feel good because it's a game that makes you feel good, right? That's called competency. Not competency in terms of superiority, but competency in the sense that I get to share this knowledge with other people and engage in that knowledge with other people and engage in something with other people. So we feel good about what we do and why we're doing it, okay? Any questions about the ABCs? No? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay. Is anybody, I saw people taking pictures. Does anybody need a second to take picture? No? Okay.
Cool.
If you want the presentation, just let me know at the end. So we already know that the growing demands means more exploration for alternative solutions, right? I said that earlier. I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why, right? And I talked about some of them earlier, but with cosplay and gaming, a lot of people gatekeep those things. And we know accessibility is not the same from person to person to person, right? When it comes to gaming, the cost is a lot for many games nowadays. Some people have older systems, some people only play certain genres, and that's okay. But the current systems that are in place, both for gaming, like this gatekeeping mentality, as well as for mental health treatment and therapists raising prices and not seeing certain people and so on and so forth, we could go on and on and on and on. It doesn't work. The current way things are, it's not working. You know, when we keep you all on a wait list for months and months and months and months and months, what are you supposed to do during that period of time? When we tell you we're full and we're not giving you resources, we're not helping, right, as therapists or as mental health professionals, right? So research actually shows that using one's hobby, like gaming, in moderation in a healthy way, can have positive effects, which we've talked about throughout this whole presentation. And depictions of mental health are being a focus in the gaming community, and that's becoming more and more mainstream. There's also characters that are designed nowadays based off of mental health disorders or things that people struggle with on a day-to-day. And that helps with representation. It helps with people feel less alone, because even though the character might not be real, the struggle in the story or the struggle with their powers or their abilities or what they've created can help them feel less alone in that way as well. Okay?
Yep.
You can do this.
All right. So, guys, what are some other games you enjoy besides the regular genre you play? Like, what other genres did you dive into, say, like, during the pandemic? MMOs?
MMOs. Okay. Skyrim?
Skyrim mods, yes. Jackbox.
Jackbox is a good one. Say that one more time in the back.
Todd Howard, leave my mods alone.
Leave your mods alone. I've heard a lot of people say Sims as well.
Yeah.
Minecraft.
7 Days to Die.
I did play a lot more Xenoblade as well.
Xenoblade.
JRPGs, I see that, yeah. Yeah.
Among Us.
Tabletop Simulator.
There you go.
That VR chat.
Also good. That's fair. Real-time strategy.
Right.
In the back, you had your hand raised? Music
Yes,
and rhythm. We were
yes.
talking about rhythm games earlier.
Cool,
Good.
cool.
Yes.
I play a lot of farming simulators, not just Stardew. I go back to a lot of the old Harvest Moon.
Okay, yeah.
Also good. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
I travel for work.
Which one? Say it again.
Travel for work
Uh-huh.
because I work in research, so
Uh-huh.
I
Right.
fly all over the country
Uh-huh.
every week. And one thing that I've found for my mental health, because I traveled through the entire pandemic,
Uh-huh.
was that I could go and draft Magic the Gathering wherever.
Yep.
Yep.
So if you would immediately have that community available, and you would just be like, oh yeah, let's play, have a great time.
Right.
No matter where you are.
Yeah. The effect of how far gaming has taken us and impacted communities, not just in the United States, but outside of the United
Right.
States as well, allows for those type of things to happen. Go ahead.
Speaking of outside the United States, my boyfriend and I were 6 months long distance when I lived in South Korea. And we used Discord and we played a lot of Stardew Valley
Okay.
as in place of date nights. So
Oh, that's cute, yeah.
we came together.
That's awesome.
We were the same way. We were long distance for about a year during the pandemic, and we used D&D and multiplayer gaming to.
That's awesome.
Okay, yeah. Like multiplayer games have a big aspect. Like I played Tekken 7 like on a really high level, but people I've met in different countries who came here for tournaments and stuff, we bonded over just talking about the game, other interests, and just general stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to hop off that 'cause I play fighting games like competitively.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The whole invention of how rollback and stuff like that made it more possible. and
Right.
accessible for people to play. So
Right.
Yep. Now the pushback that we get a lot in general is, oh, fighting games, shooting games, this, that, whatever. They're violent, they're harmful, they're this, they're that, right? But even games like that have benefits to certain people. Research can show the opposite. For every negative thing that a researcher's come up with, there's positive research out there, right? So for example, Tekken or Street Fighter, right? Those are just the games that came into my mind, are fighting games. Some people might think it's violent, but it also can let out aggression and help you learn control and learn how to work through your emotions or learn how to lose,
And patience.
right?
Your
I heard
persistence,
somebody
yeah.
say rage earlier, and rage can be a positive thing. When it's not directed towards anyone, when it allows you to release your emotions, when it allows you to say, this is how I'm feeling because of this reason, and put a reason to it, those are all positive things as humans. I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, it's going on the violent game thing. Like even games that are mindlessly violent, Doom, games that put the necrodancer, I can mindlessly focus on something else while playing that, just disconnecting and being able
Right,
to.
right.
It's nice.
All right. Are there specific qualities that anybody in the room has, like that they look for in a game that they might want to share? Go ahead.
Usually I look for like a good story within
Good story.
any sort of game. And obviously something I have ADHD and autism. I was just recently diagnosed. But I also have a processing speech disorder, so I was looking for something that would more be like accommodating to me in terms of that sort of space as well. So something like that would not be too fast paced or would overload me.
Like a turn-based RPG, we could take your turn.
RPGs,
Exactly.
And I also play like Final Fantasy 14. It'll take me a bit longer
Right.
to learn stuff, but other than that, like I'm usually able to pick things up.
But the accommodation that you just described is so important, and that's awesome. I'm glad. You can pick something else.
I think for me, difficulty scaling. So, sometimes I want to play a hard game, but a lot of the times I like to be able to have an easy game. So, if it's too hard, you get frustrated and you lose self-confidence, be like, I can't do this, that, other people are doing this, why can't I do it? So having it on like an easier difficulty, or maybe you're just there for the story as well. But again, that's also something that's kind of looked over in the gaming community. It's like, if you're only playing on easy, you're not a real gamer. Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot
Yeah.
of
That's not
true.
Yep, and we'll talk a little bit more about that idea that has a little bit to do with gamification in the next slide. Let's go here.
I always check the time frame of games when I'm trying to figure out what I want to play next. Sometimes you're like, I want an easy, quick little game that'll take me like 6 hours, and another time you're like, yeah, I'll totally sink 80 hours into this game. So time frame is definitely something I think about a lot, especially like as a streamer, because there's just days where I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, you don't have time to be on streaming. Like, I don't have time to sit 6 hours to play one game.
I'll come back to you. You had your hand raised for a little while, and then come back up
I
here.
played a lot of Fallout New Vegas and a
Nice.
game called RimWorld over the pandemic. And I suppose, having the choice of what you want to do in a game, like building your own story. Because for RimWorld, it's like a survivor. It's like basically like The Sims, and you get to equip your Sims with guns, and it's like you get to make your own story. And I don't know, being able to immerse yourself into the game is a really quality thing that I look for.
Okay.
Front.
You know what's up. You know what's up.
Or right here, and then in the beard. So we'll go here and then there.
So one of the things that I really seek is a game that people of various ages can play. My family is really close, so during the pandemic, even when we were separated, we would video call and play games.
Nice.
Okay.
And sometimes board games, and we would have the same game and play via video. So I'll go over to my family's house, and my parents are like, oh, you brought your trench coat of games. Like, oh, you don't want to play this one? It's too hard today? Well, how about this one?
Right,
How
right.
about this easy game? So I like to see that variability for collaboration, because there's a lot more collaborative games
Yep.
where you're not trying to beat each other.
Yep, that aren't competitive in nature.
The game, which is fantastic. It's a collaborative solitaire. There's just a lot more out there since the pandemic.
Yep.
Yeah.
To work together for a final goal. Even the Die Hard game,
Yep.
for those who've played it, or
The arcade one? Or okay.
Zombicide.
Okay.
Because unlike Zombicide, you're working together to get there.
Yep.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
You and Beard?
Go ahead.
So for me, a big thing I gravitate to moth to flame is identifying and figuring out patterns.
Yes.
Yeah.
So whether it's bullet hell, whether it's Bloodborne, whether it's Ninja Gaiden, I'm looking for patterns
scheme of life, it gives me a low stakes problem to solve.
Okay.
And then I get to solve that problem, figure out the pattern, and then you get like just a little boost of self-confidence, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So figuring out something tough. All right, I just navigated through 50,000 bullets.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
See, and you and I are the opposite, because when I sit and I see patterns, because I'm colorblind as well, and the games that have like puzzles that you have to solve are the ones that I'm like, all right, this is where I'm going to rage quit. But you know, it is rewarding in the end when you do accomplish it. Sorry. We'll do a couple more, and then we're gonna move on, just so for time, so we can get through material, and there'll be time for other questions and sharing as well. Go ahead. Yep.
The Holy Quartet.
Oh.
Survival, open world, crafting, early access.
You just gave like a whole dissertation on why you like that
You
game.
mean the games that are never done? They're never finished?
While 90% of them are bombs,
Mm-hmm.
for the other 10%, you play the game where you are working to make something on a game where someone is making it, trying to make something.
That is fair.
That's valid.
Fair. And open access isn't too bad either, so is early access. We'll go right here, and then we'll move on.
For me, it's being able to solve complicated problems, which I do for work, but often the nature of my job, I work for a music instrument rental company.
Uh-huh.
Oftentimes there's no right answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoy a complicated problem, but because I want to add a lot of different parts to it. It feels really satisfying when it's done, but in those instances, when there's no right answer, it's like there's no way to get to perfection.
Exactly.
No matter what, somebody's getting shafted. And so to be able to have a video game where you can pause, and you can sit back, see the full picture, and really get as close to perfection as possible is really satisfying.
That's awesome.
Finding that one answer that's actually, wow, this actually works.
Right.
It's mad, but it works. Okay.
Everybody's happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Okay. Gamification. Has anybody ever heard this term before? Okay, so some yes, some no. Gamification is just a fancy word that mental health professionals put together, and it's what we call when we use gaming in treatment and with people. That's the easiest way to break it down. It technically started in the 60s, but it didn't become mainstream till 1975. And many therapists and psychologists used gamification mostly through arcade games first and board games that were focused more on 3 areas: expression, reducing stress, and connection to other people. So they really targeted, it was mostly like, let's try these games out with the purpose to teach it a certain way so we can target these main areas with people that are in our treatment and in our courses and things, right? Then it became more broader over time. And in the UK, there's a game called Spark, which is really, really, it's just like, it teaches you so many things that you would learn in therapy, like regulation, self-control, things like that, right? And so they begin to use it, and it's still used today in the UK, specifically with teens and young adults. But they said that they were able to test it, and they said that the game became just as effective as somebody going to a therapist and sitting down in regular therapy. So the impact of gamification, we can see that it's been around for a little while. Even though it might have been board games or card games or this, that, or whatever at the beginning, the impact started off when we started seeing results. And then medical professionals were like, oh, therapists and psychologists are using this, social workers are using this, let's use it in the medical field. So they've been able to help implement certain games, specifically with kids, most of the research that I found, to help them with their mental health. Whether that's through suicidality and helping them regulate and cope more and identify their emotions. Anger management is really common, those types of things. But gamification started branching out, and therapists around the 90s were like, let's use more video games. So I've seen people use like Donkey Kong Country, Yoshi, any Mario games, those types of things. Pac-Man was really popular, and we started incorporating those into sessions. So what would happen is you would come, we would target like a certain skill or a certain thing, and then you would play the game, and as that person was playing the game or interacting with people, they would be talking about like what it felt like to do it, what is their frustration, what is their tolerance level, those types of things, to make it more mainstream, and then we would get our results from what games were being more effective and how to help implement and change that. So gamification's really, this is just its history, but now it's broader. We heard earlier someone talked about how there's easy games and how sometimes people gatekeep, and if you're not playing on hard or medium, you're not a real gamer. That started developing in the 90s when competitive gaming started becoming more of a mainstream. It's like, oh, this idea of like, if you don't do this, then you're not really this, right? And so we started putting mislabels on people, and we started becoming more competitive in this idea of gotta win, gotta win, gotta win. And it's not a bad thing if you're a competitive gamer. I'm not saying that. But when that's the only thing and the only mold that somebody can fit, then there's no areas to be able to think about such a big spectrum of things. So what therapists started doing is they started taking those competitive games and teaching people how to lose and how to be okay with losing and how to be okay with different settings and different types of people and different types of gamers. So it's definitely become bigger, and we actually started using patients as key leaders instead of the therapist leading. We would give that responsibility to the participants in the treatment and in the groups that would help create the process of recovery or the process of problem solving. I heard a lot of people say that. Or be the model of change for other people. Because instead of listening to us rant, they're able to connect with other people that were the same level as them. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions? Yeah.
So has there been any movements to bring Spark to the U.S. or like either that game or like some iterations of it?
I'm sure there's people that use Spark in their practice, but it's not mainstream in the United States. It's definitely more UK, like the content is more culturally relevant to Europe than the United States. I'm sure that they could adapt it though. Any other questions? Yes.
So I know that there are going to be different values that different types of therapists have.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, how many therapists view gamification as kind of like a threat to everything that they've learned and have been taught for literal decades? Like if gamification has been rising up since the 1990s, how many of the old heads who have been learning traditional methods since the 1930s, how are they reacting to this?
So the people you're describing are usually white males. I'm being serious though. I'm not like they're white males that are in their 60s, 70s, sometimes older, who have when you look at therapy, and I'm only speaking from my experience, there are different therapists. We're not all white. We're not all cisgendered male. And so it is a threat to many older therapists. But many mainstream therapists who are Gen Z or younger, and maybe some a little bit older than, have incorporated gamification to some degree. If they're using board games in therapy, that's gamification. If they're using matching games with a kid, that's gamification. So it's more widely accepted, but the people that tend to be older, who were brought up with the idealistics and the values that you mentioned, tend to be older.
And what percentage of therapists nowadays are still like that, or do you think that some people have just retired at this point?
I can't say statistically, like, what is the percentage, because I don't represent every therapist in every state. What I can say is I believe it to be more mainstream now, and I think it's becoming, as all of you are here, is a good indicator, that it is impacting people's lives more in a positive direction than a negative one, and the American Psychological Association agrees with that. Does that answer your question? Okay, go ahead.
I actually wanted to add on to that a little bit.
Go ahead.
I'm a county mental health caseworker, and I am 30 years younger than everyone else in my unit. So all of my coworkers' ideas is that they need to get off the video games and get outside in their mental health.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
Absolutely not. No. So I wanted to go off of that and ask how you would compete with that, or just kind of wait for them to die off. How many times
That's a good question. It's very similar to the question that we just got asked. I don't compete. I just exist to help people. And if people have an issue with that, that's on them. My job in doing this panel is to help educate people who might not have access to this information otherwise. And I think for me, and I'm always speaking for me as a therapist, my job is important to help as many people understand and not gatekeep. When it comes to my colleagues who are so caught up in the idea that gaming and things like that are too new school, they might need a therapist themselves. Go ahead.
What type of games do you use in your practice?
Oh, that's a good question. I could give you a long list, but surprisingly, I use a lot of Halo. Street Fighter is very popular. Tekken's very popular. Animal Crossing is very popular. I do groups used to do groups through Animal Crossing. What else have I used? There's a lot. Magic the Gathering was really popular. Still don't know how to play Magic the Gathering. Because my clients will be like, I want to introduce you to this game. And I'm like, cool, let's play. And I'm like, exactly, I know. But yeah, so I use a lot of different games. Board games are the most popular with younger kids, just because sometimes it's harder to teach them, other games, but it just depends. Mario Kart is really popular. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Did I answer your question? Okay.
All right, the girl in the far back who raised her hand? Yeah, you, yes.
You did say that, like video games are like an overall really good thing for people's mental health.
Yep.
What's the opposite side?
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
It's literally the next slide. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, yes, you. Okay.
So I'm sorry if the game is a little late, but
You are totally okay.
it's a two-parter. The first part, do you work in inpatient or outpatient?
Outpatient.
You work in outpatient setting, so you have a little bit more liberties when it comes to your approach.
I worked inpatient for 5 years before I did out.
Inpatient site, did you take the same approach, or was
I
it
did.
different modules? Okay, so they let you have electronics on site?
Yep, but it was heavily monitored and structured. There was no electronics allowed. And for anybody who doesn't know the difference between outpatient and inpatient are usually people who are committed, who can't have access because they're going through a mental health crisis in some capacity. But yeah, so it was heavily structured. It was heavily multiple therapists in the room, and it was only in a specific place.
Nice. And the second part, to go off of the person who spoke earlier, I have similar work dynamic where I'm younger than some of my peers, and they do kind of, when it comes to my approach, they kind of want to challenge it. So what I tell them to combat it is evidence-based practice says to meet the customer and the client where they are.
Yep.
So
EBPs.
For skill building and for leisure and coping strategies,
Yep.
give them a homework that they can actually do. So if you're depressed in bed for 3 days doing nothing, then harm and risk reduction, yes, get up and play video games
Right.
2 hours a day because that's you re-engaging with the world. So
Yep.
that's what I would tell the advice to your lady if she gets challenges from the older generation who have been doing this for a long time, not to knock them, but they haven't gone back into a book or a DSM
For a long time.
There's no mislabeling bulky.
There is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Evidence-based practice does change.
Yep.
And you have to keep with the times. So.
Yep. And you just kind of explained the last point that's on the slide, which is we focus on the use of critical interventions that help support patients further, which includes new ideas as well as old ideas. And what the person that was just talking about these are main issues that have been issues in the field for a long, long time. Gamification and gaming in general is just one that's been long history for a long, long time. Anybody else? I thought I saw one other hand raised. There's a couple of hands raised. Okay, we'll do two or three more, because we'll have time at the end.
Let's get the guy in the back.
Far back.
Do you guys ever help people with, let's say a lot of people who maybe are dealing with a lot of mental health crises, and maybe they find in an inpatient setting, they really connect with a game, but maybe unfortunately there's an intersectionality with income as well. Do you guys give people options where they can access these games, maybe at home, so they can get that? Because it's great when they go to the office and they can play.
Right, for a short period of time.
They need that at home sometimes too.
Yep.
Especially for having that
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest with you. It really depends on where you're from. Washington State doesn't fund programs like that. And so many therapists, if they do that, will have to pay out of pocket to ensure that a client has what they need. Does that always happen? Probably not.
You know, I guess I would argue a Nintendo Switch is probably cheaper than medication these days. So.
But then again, there you go. But then again, that talks a lot about the problem, right? That's why there are alternatives to traditional therapy that are effective, right?
Also, there are places that are overlooked, like check your local library. Your library might let you rent
Yeah.
video games out. So,
Also check your local game shop.
Yep.
Board game nights.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
They're great.
And there are some places and coalitions that do collect old gaming systems and things like that. It might not be exactly what they played when they were in the hospital or in therapy, but they can have access to it in a place that's safe and at least gets them exposed to games as well. 1 second. I think there was one more question towards the back.
The girl, yeah.
Go ahead.
Her, and then we'll go to you.
And we'll come here.
Personal anecdote, I suppose, about
Yep.
therapy games specifically.
Yep.
A really good friend of mine, their therapy has been done exclusively through Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Their therapist has them basically run an adventure every week. They have their session and
Mm-hmm.
they have them tackle their specific IRL issues through
Mhm.
the function of this D&D setting. It's been very fascinating to hear how that's been helping them a lot, because it's also been allowing them to explore more insular questions like their gender identity and all of that through miming as this character for all of their therapy, which
Yeah.
is very fascinating.
That's awesome. That's great, and that's a good example. Come here, and we'll come there.
So I know an option for expensive board games are very expensive,
Yep.
especially like the more extensive
Yep.
ones that are like therapy inducing.
Yeah.
But it might be an option for some people. I know where I live, there's a bar that has board games. Like if you buy a drink,
You can play.
you can play all the board games.
Yep. Yep.
And like
Thank you.
I know alcohol, they do have non-alcoholic drinks.
Yep.
How do you feel about those places?
I'm not opposed to them. Any resource where somebody has access and can benefit from it, I don't have a problem
You
with.
can, they really support like the community of like just everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree. And I'm okay with it. We'll end here.
Okay, no, I was just gonna say to the lady in the back, I have a D&D group that meets every week, and one of our people, one of the guys that joins our group he suffers very much from depression, like really, really bad. Him being in the D&D group, he says that is one of the best things he's ever done, it helps him out so much, because we don't really go on quests or anything, we just kind of do stupid things. So D&D. Yes. But he says it has like been the best therapy. It's been better than most of his therapies he's ever had. It's just
That's awesome. That's amazing. And as a therapist, I love hearing. I could literally be here all day, but we don't have that time. Hearing your guys' stories about how gaming helps. So thank you for sharing, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone's been asking
All right.
questions.
We're going to move on. Somebody asked about the opposite effects, so we're going to talk about that. Because for every positive, right, there is a...
Yep.
Or, I don't like to use the word negative all the time, so I say sometimes unhealthy or unhelpful behavior. Do you want to take this slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it coming up, guys?
Oh, no. No, you don't.
Hold on. Okay.
All right,
Is it
okay.
there?
Okay.
Okay. So, someone asked, like, what are the effects? The most common effects of too much gaming, like when it's becoming an addiction or it's no longer beneficial to someone's mental health, usually is social isolation because they're playing too much into this specific game or spending too many hours doing it. Sometimes it can lead to excessive school or work absences or just absences from life. We call that, like, if they were involved in, like, religious activities or like hobbies or things like that that they once did before that they're no longer doing, and they're spending all that time gaming, that would count. A lack of engagement in relationships if they have a significant other or they're not taking care of themselves or kids or responsibilities. Skipping meals and showers. Some people continue to not eat or shower or take care of themselves, brushing their teeth, not necessarily because they're depressed, but because that they want to continue the story or they want to beat the next person or whatever is that driving force. And skipping meals and forgetting to eat are two different things. Skipping meals is usually, not always, intentional, and this is really important to separate. That's why they're both on here. Skipping meals is usually has some intent to keep playing the game, intent to do something more. Forgetting to eat is just, you just play through your meals. Does that make sense? There's a little bit of a difference. Confusing reality and fantasy. You become your character in real life outside of like appropriate scenes or places to do so. Example, I had a client not that long ago who was really into D&D, and she became her character. She started dressing like her character. She ate only the things her character would eat in the game, and she just did that all the time. And it was an addiction at that point, because she was spending hours and hours and hours spending money on D&D dice and outfits and things like that. So that's an extreme case, though. But yeah, that's when it becomes excessive. So these are concerns for both youth and adults. These are all signs and symptoms. Go ahead.
Financial concern too.
Yep.
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 You're gonna buy the next thing, the next case, the next expansion.
Specific example with him is I was addicted to a fashion game on my phone for a very long time, and I recently tabulated how much money I've spent on it just to see how bad it got me. And
Right.
mobile game addictions are terrifying.
Yep.
I had spent $13,000 on that game throughout my entire
Yeah. Ooh. It's even.
At the same time, though, there was something that drove that behavior, right?
Right.
The game itself. And so I'm not going to fault you for making, having that. It's a reality of what happens sometimes.
The important part was learning that it became an addiction.
Right.
Right.
Like stopping playing it. Like I still feel the compunction to keep it on my cell phone.
Yeah.
Because I spent so much on it, but
Right.
I haven't opened it.
But that's a good thing, right?
I have something to add to that. Even like for some people who like creating them content creators or people who say who are in sports, they have to balance like the same thing. Because if you don't plan to go to compete somewhere and win, or like if you've been competing at a lot of events and you don't win, that can lead up to expenses and you're just constantly wasting money. And if you do this too much, even your esports team will drop you because you're not bringing in any revenue. You're constantly losing. You're wasting their money. So you need to like constantly balance it.
Yeah.
Same thing with content creation. Say if you like get invited to a convention as a guest, you need to make sure that convention is paying you enough to meet your basic needs. If you do not have your basic needs met, and you're just doing it because I'm riding the high of like I just want to go to a con or whatever, that can become an addiction, and it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I see a lot of hands being raised, so I'm just trying to track who raised their hand first.
The
Right
guy in the
here,
red.
red shirt.
Red shirt, glasses, red shirt.
Right
Black
here.
hair, glasses, red shirt. Did you just turn around?
Right, yeah, you. Did you want to say something?
Did you?
No, I did actually. So, it's funny you bring that up because about like professional gaming in general, right? So we tackle the nuances of like recreational gaming and how
Yeah.
it's like very helpful, right? But, like competitive gaming, especially like league or like tech,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
King of Fighters, like if you don't make revenue for your company, then what are you? You're expendable. You're
Right,
a
right.
liability.
Right.
They pay for you to win. That's the whole point of the job, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to look into other revenues, right, where you have to try and make money, and if you don't, then you're broke. There's nothing you can do.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So I see there's like a lot of content creators that have to go through that grind of trying to make money and trying
Yeah.
to win, and it's its own pressure in itself.
Yep.
I do believe it to be extremely unhealthy. Like you,
It can be.
excessive gaming patterns. You
Yep.
forego your health in exchange for that next paycheck.
Right.
Yep. Or,
Potential paycheck.
Yeah.
right. Or even the fame of it all.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's even more frustrating because when you become an esports team or whatever, you're basically like signing a co-contract that like, oh, if I don't make enough money off a certain platform, and even the platforms like Twitch TikTok, YouTube, they all have their own separate algorithms, and they can work against you. So you have to like make sure whatever is in your contract for that team, you got to make sure it covers you, and make sure it understands that these platforms constantly change.
Yep.
Trends, no matter, it's constantly changing.
Right.
So yeah.
All right, we're gonna go here in Raven, and then we'll move on.
What I wanted to ping on was confusing reality and fantasy.
Yep.
Because among LARPers, we have the same thing, we just call it me.
Yep.
It's just like hacking on the console.
Yep.
It's honestly a lot more high risk.
Mhm.
Because you're physically playing on that console.
Right.
Yep.
For,
Yep.
4 or 5 days at a time.
Yep.
So it's vast shit.
Yep. And learning how to probably separate and accept both identities, both as, you know, yourself and who you become.
I've talked to people where
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, we're gonna move on. I want to talk about how to re-engage someone who's maybe going through some of these things, and then we'll go to the next slide, which is just some resources I want to go over because we have about 10 minutes. And if anybody has some questions, we might be able to take one or two, and then we'll be done. Okay? All right. So this says cosplay and gaming because either or can be impactful, but we're talking about specifically gaming here. How do you re-engage someone who's so far out there? Understand for many people that there's a reason. It's not always an escape, but there's a reason why there's a behavior, or there's a reason that it's something is driving the behavior. You want to validate feelings of frustration or stress that might feel when you tell them that their behavior is unhealthy, right? They're going to have a response to that. Help them produce interventions that can help healthy, like the opposite. And it doesn't have to be exercise. Exercise can mean a lot of things for a lot of people, but helping them through showing them healthy supportive outlet of their emotions. Maybe it's going on a walk, walking a dog, petting an animal, going to the zoo. There's a million things that you could do. Supporting the development of long-term goals, understanding that short-term goals might be all that person can do for a long time. Not long-term, but for every short-term goal that they accomplish, they're working towards the long-term of getting better. Be consistent in checking on them, but don't let it be a burden for yourself. That's the other part, I apologize, that's cut off. You can't be everybody's therapist. You can check in on your friend, you can tell them how you feel, but at some point, if they're not listening, they might need a higher level of help to support them. Understand what your boundaries and limitations are, and set them and keep them. And then establishing alternative outlets. Maybe they need to take a break from gaming. And that's okay. Everybody does sometimes. And having some alternative outlets that they can turn to is really important. Okay? Any questions on this slide? No. Some quick resources, specifically because I talked about how therapy is expensive at the beginning. Therapy Den is a free resource that anybody can use to look for therapists in their area. A lot of therapists have low fees for people to seek out treatment there. Open Path Collective has sessions as low as $30 a session that therapists offer. It's also a free platform that you can sign up for. Crisis text line is 741-741. A crisis counselor who's trained can respond to you. Sometimes the wait times are long. Psychology Today, which I'm not a fan of, but I'm putting it on here anyway, sometimes can be a good resource to find a good fit. And 988, does anybody know what that is? Okay, I see some hands. So you guys know 911? Yeah. 988 is now the mental health number to call if you're in a crisis. A counselor, and these are mental health professionals, will be on the phone. These are not just trained people from the community. Yes?
Sorry, I'm not joking. Why did you use the 988?
Because 911 is not trained or equipped to handle mental health crises. And a lot of times cops and firefighters, etc., first responders don't know what to do. So, yeah, go ahead.
I would also recommend 211.
Yep.
A lot of places have mobile crisis units.
Yep. Mobile crisis team is somebody that will come to you in your area. Yes?
A lot of local, like universities also
Yep.
have interns that operate either for free or on sliding scale.
Yep.
If you look at some of like Psychology Today, for example, if you look up sliding scales, they might be able to take you for free even if they charge like $180 a session.
Yep. And you usually can last a year or 2 years, depending on how long they're in the program. Last thought.
So the other place to look, a lot of times your work will have
EAPs.
options for you.
Yep, EAPs is what it's called.
EAPs. So like my job has an EAP, and so I get free therapy and free psychiatry.
Yep.
So you really just need to get in touch with them,
Yep.
and they can find you the resources that you need and get you in touch with whoever.
And for those that don't know what EAP stands for, that's Employment Assistance Program. It's mental health therapists who are contracted with the program. So these are the resources I leave you. I hope that this has been helpful for many of you, and I really appreciate you all being here. I hope you have a good rest of your con, and thank you so much for coming.
Any